CTO and our COO, when they joined the company in early 2017, we sat down and we said, look, entertainment is where it's going to start. There is a huge opportunity here. And that's what we saw. And then we said, we think eventually this will be very useful for military, security, police, and so forth. But it's likely too early now. We started in 2020 to work with the German army. And when we started, that was difficult because it's not just pushing a button and in a 5-minute kind of experience, but working with special forces, and many times training is split-second decisions that, decides if maybe someone will die.
Welcome to a new episode of XR and AI Spotlight, the show that gives the stage to the founders and makers pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli, I'm your host, and I'm here today with Leif Petersen. Leif is the founder and CEO of HOLOGATE, a global leader in extended reality solution with an interesting success story. It all started with entertainment, and since its inception, HOLOGATE has expanded to hundreds of multi-user VR systems across 42 countries, engaging over 22 million people, with major IP like Ghostbusters and Angry Birds. More recently, the team has created a specialized section dedicated to training and simulation, and they managed to deploy trainings with the German Army and the Swiss Police Special Forces. It doesn't happen often to be this successful on both fronts, and today you will learn how they design and optimize every aspect of their location-based experiences.
If you watch replays on arcade games, you will recognize that people die every 3 minutes. At the start, our games were 10 minutes, and then we realized, this could be 8, and then we had them at 8, and we were like, 8 or 10 is kind of the same thing. So then we added 5 minutes, and it was like,
how stripping a game to its simplest form was just the key for fun.
Like in a space now where throughput is really important, and you just want people to go through but still enjoy themselves. More than one button, it's a no-go.
And that is an extra reason why probably giving a prop with a gun is just the easiest thing you can do.
Exactly. And even all the reload mechanics that we tried and over the years, they were all just in the way. So eventually you end up with just bloody pull the trigger and shoot up stuff. So it has to be simple.
What type of game turned out to be the most successful?
I think there's really two ends to the spectrum. So one is a clear game where it's skill-based, so you gain points, or you have a player versus player game where you play against others. I've seen, interestingly, that mostly drag a bigger audience.
And what it took to pivot to training and simulation designed for governmental organizations like the German Army and the Swiss Police Special Forces.
So now the business has changed to B2G, which is business to government. Now, if you work with, police or military or government agencies and so forth, the decision process is 10 times as long and tricky and difficult to navigate, and it's political.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank our sponsor, Meshi, who made this episode possible. Meshi is a real powerhouse for generating 3D assets with AI. You can start with a simple text or image prompt and get high-quality, stylized model in just a minute. One feature that I personally love is the ability to create stylized textures for any mesh, with or without UV, and since the release of Meshing 2.5, pro users can even edit only section of the generated textures with just a text prompt. Try it out, go to meshi.ai, start the 7 days trial, and after that, use the code XRAI20 to get 20% off your subscription. And now, it's time to roll the title and welcome Leif under the spotlight. Hi Leif, it's great.
Well, thanks, Gabriele, for the invite, and great to talk to you. Thank you.
So, we do have a lot to cover. So let me start with where the origin of HOLOGATE was, being the entertainment. So what are the things that you have learned from operating LBE all over the world?
Yeah, there's a bit of a story there, of course. I mean, personally, I got to experience VR already in the 90s, and but also in Germany we had 2 or 3 systems. And for just out of pure luck, one of them was quite close to where I went to school. And so there was a game called Dactyl Nightmare, which was a multiplayer shooter, like player versus player with 4 people, and you had to wear this like crazy heavy headset basically and a joystick, and then it was a shoot 'em up kind of thing. That was the coolest game. And so when the first VR headsets of the, let's say, latest generation or latest wave now that started around, I guess, 2015, 14-ish, came out, I mean, at the start, I was still a bit disappointed with the first Oculus dev kits and so forth. But then for me, what really changed everything was when the first dev kit for the HTC Vive came out. It was really impressive at the time because you could walk freely in a larger space without any latency and delay. And the graphics, it was just this really amazing, eye opening experience. And so I think we had that maybe in early 2016. And then I decided, okay, we have to do something here.
You could have just start building games for it, right? But instead, you decided to go for a location-based experience, right? What was the driver for picking that, other than just building purely content for the headset?
Well, again, it's probably, going back from, I thought, okay, this is history repeating from the 90s. And, back then LBE was a thing and was big, and, and you had virtuality and all over, all arcades and everywhere. And so I thought, that before a consumer rollout is going to happen, and a lot of people are going to buy these headsets that are really expensive. At least at the time, there was no consumer headsets that were really expensive. I mean, now it's maybe a little different, when it's still a little slow, the consumer uptake. But back then, this was just where this didn't even exist. Like, no one had VR headsets. So I thought, okay, this is the wrong approach to try and scale a business. You have to start somewhere else, and like basically learning from the lessons that this has already happened before in the 90s, and it really worked.
Understand. And so when starting to grow this location-based entertainment, so meaning providing headset to locations, so what were some of the bottlenecks that you encountered, and then how did you solve them?
Oh yeah, so I mean, of course, at the start, there was still, I mean, we had so many technical issues still to work through, and figuring out how everything works, from whatever lighthouse systems to how to do cables and whatnot, and get stable games, that don't crash. And I don't know what, like, there was a lot of technical hurdles, of course, to overcome, and then to learn from operators, but also mostly users. So mostly basically watching people play the games, and to understand what can they do, what do they understand instinctively, and how long should a game be, because we didn't know. So this was all new. So it was just basically down to experimentation of trying to figure out, what's actually a format that will work with people and operators, and how to make money with this. So what do people actually pay for it, even though they don't know really what it is, and so forth. So yeah, there was a lot of things that needed to be figured out at the start, of course.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned these three sides of things, right? So, but of course, you providing the hardware, the solution, the operator, and the users, right? And you mentioned just one thing, being, for example, how long a game should be, being one of the things that you need to figure out. I mean, just curious, what have you found to be the sweet spot for a location-based experience?
Yeah, so when we brought out the first game in 2017, you could set the time for the game. So basically, we let the operator decide. And then we also, at the start, our games were 10 minutes. And then we realized, oh, this could be 8. And then we had them at 8. And then we're like, well, 8 or 10 is kind of the same thing. So then we added 5 minutes, and was like, well, 5 minutes doesn't feel too different to like a 10-minute experience, because at the end you come out and you had this experience and you forgot yourself and how long this actually was. And most people were just overwhelmed with the experience, and they didn't, like, no one really, it wasn't such a huge difference between playing for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But for the user, yeah, for the consumer, let's say, or for the player, But for the operator, of course, it makes a huge difference, because if you have a game that's 10 minutes versus 5 minutes, you can make twice as much money on the operational side, and so at the same time still offer an experience that people enjoy and that's good enough, to get people thrilled. And you can do a lot in 5 minutes. And I mean, if you look into later on, of course, we then compare to a lot of other games and systems, and also traditional arcade games and so forth. And I mean, if you look into like traditional arcade games, you also basically pay for time, because you die every 3 minutes in a normal arcade game. Like if you watch replays on arcade games, you will recognize that people die every 3 minutes. And so the games are designed so that you die every 3 minutes. And then, of course, you can play further. But for us, it was more, first of all, we couldn't create so much content, so that you had, like, an arcade game might have whatever, 30 minutes of content or so, or maybe 40. Actually, it's not that much, So most arcade games, they don't have as much content as a consumer game has. But yeah, if you can create an arcade game that has a certain replayability, but at the same time still offers some sort of bit of a story arc, so that you have like an end boss or something, and then you can go out with this big bang. And so yeah, we always try to get experiences that have some replay value, but also have some sort of story arc, so that it's not just a pure game, but it's also an experience. And then you have to kind of go in between, because it's very different. Just a game or an experience, it's it's two different things, kind of. One is more story, the other one's more a gameplay, and then you have to choose how far do you lean to either side.
So you have said a lot, and I think that there is already something we can fill up the rest of the episode just with this. But
Yes.
one thing. So first of all, I want to unpack a little bit this user experience, so the experience that the user has in these locations, right? And then I also want to move to the operator, because that is at the core, right? Without making them happy, without building something that is scalable for them, you wouldn't be here, right? So before we go into that, you mentioned about what are the things that you have seen that work to provide a memorable experience in 5 minutes that you could suggest maybe to other people that are trying to pack as much excitement in such a short amount of time?
As I said, I think there's really two ends to the spectrum. So one is a clear game where it's skill based. So you gain points by maybe either a player versus environment sort of game, where you might maybe shoot at some baddies or something, or you have a player versus player game where you play against others, maybe your family or team. And I mean, we've seen, interestingly, that mostly player versus environment, so cooperative games, for some reason drag a bigger audience than player versus player games. And so this is mostly because I think there's a lot of, it depends on, there's different types of people that play games. And like with HOLOGATE, we have all ages from, small kids to like families and friends and groups and whatever, everyone. And so I think that, with families, you might want to rather do something together than playing against each other. So if it's a different mindset if you want to play against each other, and then it's maybe more competitive, like laser tag or so. But it's that's basically skill based games where you can get points for something, whatever you do. Or it could be something like some sort of Beat Saber or music game or whatever skill based game. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there is story, right? And so story is not gameplay. So it's basically and so story starts already at small, at small, small things are also stories. So if you have some end boss or some other enemy or whatever that comes up, it's story, because you present something, and that's a story beat, because you say, okay, now let's take Ghostbusters, you fight against Stay Puft, the Marshmallow Man. It's story, and so you did that, and you defeated Stay Puft, and then you add story to a skill-based game. But story will always go against replayability, because if you watch a movie, it's a story that you watch, and most people don't rewatch movies. Sometimes if they really like a movie, you rewatch a movie and then you watch it again. But mostly people watch a movie once, or a TV series, they watch it once. If you're a total fan, maybe you watch the whole thing another time, and that's maybe it, maybe 3 times, but mostly not more. So, but if it's a game, take Beat Saber or something, you can play it again and again and again. And so then, and that was also something, that experiential, like The Void or something. The Void leaned very much into story kind of based experiential VR. And so they tried to then add gamification, so point systems and so forth later. And the interesting thing is even theme parks are doing this now. So if you take theme park rides from Disney, like the latest Spider-Man rides.
Yeah.
Exactly. See, this is, and they started with something like, Toy Story, which isn't, I think, a very good ride, because it's essentially a shoot 'em up kind of thing, a laser tag thing. Or they did, I think Man in Black had scoring, but yeah, Disney added some sort of gamification over the years, and they're now adding it because it adds value, because people want to do it again, because you compete a little, and then so, and you get bragging rights for being better than whatever your dad, or so it's this sort of thing, right?
Absolutely. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like that whenever there is a location based entertainment, these things are important choices. And based on your experience, point system based apps or games tends to attract a broader audience, and potentially repeatedly, because they haven't just experienced the story once, but they have, because at the end it is indeed about that repeated business, right? And then we move to the side of the operator that is depending on two things, based also on our previous conversation, and I would love if you could build on top of that. One is being indeed the attractiveness of the experience, and I imagine that could revolve around the IPs that are involved, for example, but also the turnaround, being like how fast can people join in, how fast people can leave, that there is no downtime. So can you unpack the operator side for us?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I think the most important rule is that it kind of always has to work. So, and if you think of theme parks and theme park rides being down in like Disney or something, it's just terrible, because people will be disappointed, and even worse if they were in the ride and then they have to get out, or whatever. It's just, or if someone mess up some ride cinema or something, and you're just right in the middle of it. So it kind of always has to work. So like having a game that whatever crashes or has bugs or something, it's just not acceptable. So a game that's in an arcade needs to be super stable. And so we early on learned these lessons, and then we have now a pretty solid QA team here. So it's students. It's a team of 10 people currently, I think 10 or 12 people that do just QA, so every day. So they test everything. So this is now for, of course, mostly the simulation and training stuff, but also for our games, we had people like full time that were just doing testing, because if it doesn't run stable, then the operator can't use it, because they have to, now they will disappoint people. They will have to return money, and it's bad for the location. Maybe you get bad Google reviews or something. So stability is a huge thing for the operator. Then ease of use, of course. So it has to be super easy, because mostly people that will operate these attractions are mostly, like maybe temporary workers, or people that, young of age, or teenagers, and mostly they don't care, to be honest. Yeah, so they just there to do their job, and some of them are great. And you can also see that if you have good operators and that have good staff, it makes a huge difference to how well an attraction does, because it's just if they're trained or not. And some venues, we have hundreds of venues around the world, they're just terrible, and they don't care, and they don't train people, and it's awful. Or it was also like hygiene, cleaning headsets and so forth. It's of course another point. And then, so yeah, ease of operation, so that it's very simple for the operator to just turn it on. So you just have one button and that's on. Or ideally now, I mean, what's kind of the landscape has changed a lot in the last few years. That mostly now more inexpensive games that are self-operated kind of really gained a lot of ground, and so it's basically essentially back to arcade machines where people don't need, or operators don't need someone at the machine that attends, and people would just sit down, play for 3 minutes, pay their 3 minutes, maybe throw in some more credits or swipe their card, and then play maybe for another 3 minutes. And that's
And
arcade kind of style business.
And when you mention about this also ease of use, right? What kind of system do you have? I mean, how much customization runs around these things, right? You have headset from HTC, I believe, right? That's your main workhorse. But then how do you deploy the app or make sure that it stops, or
Yeah.
is how this backend works?
Yeah, so I mean, from the very start, because I had this experience also, as I said, from the '90s, and I got how this should work. You need an operator console that's super easy. The game, you can't just take any game. You can't just take a game, whatever, back then from the Steam store, and people tried to do that. And a lot of the arcades were struggling with that because the games weren't made for arcades or family entertainment centers, but for home users. And it's very different because how these games work is just very different, because essentially for a location based experience, games have to be super intuitive. Like we also quickly learned that having more than one button, for example, is impossible. People, like, if you've built anything in VR, you know how difficult it is to teach anyone anything in VR, because they don't listen, they don't look anywhere, they don't read your whatever signs or whatever you want. They do whatever. And so, like, in a space now where throughput is really important, and you just want people to go through but still enjoy themselves, like more than one button, it's a no-go. And of course, there's another thing that when people walk into an entertainment park, they automatically switch off their brain and maybe use they don't want to think, so they're here for play, and play is intuitive, and they don't want to think. So, like, if it's too thinky or too difficult, then it also doesn't work. It actually has to be very simple, because you don't want to think. It's like something you just worked, and now you go somewhere to enjoy yourself. So it has to be easy. So this is
Yeah.
also something.
And that is an extra reason why probably giving a prop with a gun is just the easiest thing you can do in some ways, because at least, okay, I know do this, maybe I reload it in some way.
Exactly. And even all the reload mechanics that we tried and over the years, they were all just in the way. So eventually you end up with just bloody pull the trigger and shoot up stuff. So kind of, it has to be simple. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And so you mentioned indeed another important point, that these experiences need to be built for arcades, right? They cannot just be Rich's plank that people try to do, set up the plank moves, and these crazy things. So maybe on a broader perspective, how do you build this content? Do you have an internal team? Do you use external people? Like, can you guide us through that process?
yeah, I mean, we've grown the team here over the years. We're now about 80 people in Munich. So we have them, and the majority is a game studio. So we're really a game studio. Someone from the very start. If you look at the company, sometimes people think, oh, they're just selling these systems, but no, it's of course all custom. So all the content was either built in house, or we had some content that we published onto the system, but then we worked closely with the developers and evaluated, if the games are suitable or not, and what they would have to change and address to actually make it suitable, that it actually makes sense for operators and also players, of course, at the end.
And one question is, I was wondering if so far have you used Gen AI in some way around your process consistently? If it's something you have experimented or not, just curious.
Oh no, I mean, first of all, I mean, we're of course following all these tools, and it's like every day I'm just impressed how quickly everything progresses. And even just today, I saw again some, runway 3 alpha latest generation videos where you just think, okay, like my background's coming, from mostly, film and 3D animation and commercials and so forth, and now you see photorealistic cars that actually look exactly like the real car, that drive through, fantastic landscapes that would have, back in the days, taken us weeks or months to make these shots and make it as pretty, and now it's basically AI click. And so I think the whole industry will be crazy disrupted by this. And so this is only the beginning, because this is now flat, it's 2D content, so it came from still images, now it's video, and then it will be 3D, and you can already see where the 3D is starting, and it is starting. And so maybe 2 years ago, when you looked at what Midjourney or something was doing, and it was like these funny pictures that like had six and a half fingers and looked just awful, like that stage's over, and that's only 2 years or 1.5 years ago or so. And now you look at, all right, there's some people doing 3D stuff here, and that's coming out of generative AI. And so now, so we're using some generative AI for textures, or like even some promotional images or something for certain things, and I think it's fine. I personally think it's a natural evolution, and yes, it's terrible for all artists and so forth, and it's of course a little dubious how the whole rights situation and how this works, but like it's evolution, and you're not going to stop it. So like if you try and regulate this, it's far too late. So it's happening, and so yes, it's I don't know. I don't want to say there's anything. I think there's nothing to be judged here if it's good or bad, or it's a new tool and it's there. And for us currently, it's great because we can utilize it in some workflows, and but still it's still a lot of work that we're doing here, that is still manual, let's say, like 3D models and so forth, because at the end we are still quite performance hungry, and so everything has to be optimized, and so there's still a lot of artistry, let's say, behind all of that.
I wanted to have a quick break to remind you that if you like this conversation, you should check all past episodes at xraispotlight.com. Also, if you don't want to miss anything, remember to subscribe to the XR AI Spotlight newsletter, and you will immediately get an updated list with over 200 mixed reality apps you can filter from various fields, weekly in-depth interviews, and one product spotlight personally tested by me right in your mailbox every week. And now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, and so you mentioned, for example, that I think 3D will come, and I think it's getting better by the day. You mentioned, on the other hand, that there are some things that are already, let's say, ready, like, for example, using images, retouching images for some of the marketing material, right? This could be something. You, as the CEO of HOLOGATE, right? How do you see that impacting also the way people are working? Do you expect, hey, maybe I don't need to contract people outside, I can do this internally? I mean, have you got some thoughts of how that will impact the way your team is made?
It is already impacting us, yes. So there is, and what you just said, like retouch something, and that's a very, like, I have a bit of a graphics background, and I still, sometimes hands-on still do things here, like marketing materials and these sort of things. And I mean, now even on Photoshop, like to remove something, like back in the days, it was like stamp tool madness, and it would take you whatever hours or a day or longer to paint something out. Now you mark it and say, and it's gone, And so this is just like simple examples, of course, how the tools get better, or generate certain things where you can't find stock footage for something, and then I just recently had this. I wanted to have some, paramedic that looked in a very specific way, and I couldn't find stock footage for it, or they all looked cheesy, and it was just much easier to generate it on Midjourney, right? And so for these sort of things, we're using it, and of course, maybe, back in the days, you would have maybe you had to get a photographer and actually shoot these pictures, and maybe now you can just generate them. So I think, yes, of course, the creative industry, as I said earlier, it's hugely being disrupted. And I mean, just yesterday I found this great, I can't remember the artist, but it was Tokyo artist that created this music video basically on Chat GPT, and I can't remember which sound AI tool, and then Mid Journey and Runway, and it's just this fantastic music video. And I've created music videos for lots of bands in around 2000, like Rammstein and like so forth. And this was a huge process, and it's just changing the landscape. And I mean, even then, back then, like, and you had MTV, and music videos were big and cost a lot of money, and this kind of all went away a little. And so I think now this will be disrupted again, of course, and then it's AI generated everything. It's just
And
it's evolution.
it's not something that you can stop, as you said before.
No, it's evolution. It's happening. So this is happening, and that's the way it is.
Before we move into the other side, right? Because we have discussed about the entertainment things, but I also want to discuss on this enterprise and simulation as side business. We'll see how you call it right now. Before moving there, I just want to have one more question regarding mixed reality. Is that something that you have experimented with right now, or not at the level of location-based entertainment?
We've done our experiments, and we are closely following what's happening. I think the difference, of course, with mixed reality is that, regarding entertainment, mostly you want to dive into content and really be immersed in something. And mixed reality is bringing something to you like AR. You're still in the same space. So I think for a lot of some applications, it might make sense. For others, it's really maybe easier to just do it in VR, because you can save a lot and you don't have to build these fantastical environments or something that you would then need to basically fill up the rest that's still real. There is certain use cases maybe for laser tag arenas and so forth that exist, but yeah, we've tried a few things. Of course, we're following this also for training and simulation, and it's just a very similar discussion in that space. So there's advantages to doing VR versus MR, AR. Yeah.
Okay. So the next point being indeed what I wanted to discuss about today was this simulation for especially military forces in different form. So this is not something that is new. You have been doing it now for quite some time. And the first thing I was curious is, was this something that you actively seek, or was just an opportunity that happened on your plate?
And so I have partners in the company here, so especially our CTO and our COO. And basically, when they joined the company in early 2017, we sat down and discussed what we wanted to build and what we wanted to do. And we said, look, entertainment is where it's going to start, because this is their location-based entertainment. There's a huge opportunity here. And that's what we saw. And then we said, we think eventually this will be very useful for military, security, police, and so forth. But it's likely too early now. And it was, because, back then, as we discussed earlier already, the technology, and we started in 2020 to work with the German army. And back then it was like a little side project. We strongly believed in it. But, I wasn't sure if, let's say, the world or the military or police would be ready to actually embrace this, and if the technology would be able to hold up to, the expectations, so that, they can actually use it and it generates value for them and gives them a new capability. And when we started, that was difficult, because that was still, VR backpacks and like huge, expensive
And I'm
OptiTrack.
curious. I'm curious, when you mention technology, can you be more specific? Like, what part of the technology was finicky and now it is more robust?
So it's still finicky, to put that out of the way. And it's still the early days. So, and we still probably need a few years until it's actually where it starts to, get rid of all this finickiness. But back then it was beyond finicky. It was just crazy geeky. And I mean, when we started working with the German army, it was similar to the state of the art, how you would do it at the time. And that's 4 years ago. you would have VR backpacks, so several kilo backpacks on your back with rendering the graphics into a headset. And then if you wanted to do large space tracking beyond what maybe lighthouses could do, which was larger than 10 by 10 meters, which you would usually want to do, you would have to go to, and you want proper full body tracking, so you need trackers on your body, like at least 5, so for the feet, and like on your ankles and wrists and on your body, so that you get full body tracking, because you want full body awareness, so that you can see other people, also for after action reviews, so afterwards you can basically see what people actually did and not just some funny simulation of what maybe the body parts kind of did. And so back then you had to use some sort of optical tracking, so like Vicon or OptiTrack or other similar optical tracking, basically coming from motion capture, used for mostly feature film or commercial productions, and they were really expensive systems. So if you would buy one motion capture camera, you would pay several €1,000 just for one camera, and then if you want to do a larger space, you would need maybe 100, and so then you're looking at several €100,000 just on cameras, and so that was very expensive to do.
And now?
Yeah, so I mean, now this has become, so of course backpacks have gone away. I think we were one of the first companies that, at least in the simulation and training space, deployed streaming solution, so that you can stream directly to the headsets and still maintain working with a better GPU than what you have in a headset. And so I don't know when we did that, maybe 2.5 years ago or so, or 2 years, I don't know, whenever the whole streaming thing started. So that was one thing, I think, that removed the backpack, which was essential to actually now utilize these systems properly, because before this was just a major hassle. And then on the other side, tracking. So we're currently working with ultimate trackers from HTC that allow us to do larger spaces. So we have a client that's doing 50 by 30 meters, so huge spaces, even beyond the specs of what HTC is claiming. So it can do 1,000 square meters or maybe even more. And so if you imagine doing that or trying to do that with optical cameras, this would have been a very expensive endeavor.
Right. So, and of course, there is a technological side, right? Being like, okay, now we don't have a backpack, we can track our full body, bigger area. So, technology sometimes still finicky, but it's kind of sorted. On the other hand, to manage this relationship, right, and to grow and deliver a solution that fits the need of, for example, the Swiss police, like something that you recently announced, like, what do you actually needed? Like, how does this whole thing comes together beyond just putting headsets and the props in the hands of police officers?
Yeah, so this is a learning process again, I think, similar to what we discussed earlier on the entertainment side, where we had to learn what works. Now we have to learn again, how does this work? And it's maybe a bit more complicated, because it's way more complicated processes, because it's not just pushing a button and in a 5-minute kind of experience, but it's trainings that are serious. So we're working with special forces, and so it's what this is. And many times, training is split-second decisions and decision making that decides if maybe someone will die. So it's very serious, and so as such, there's a lot of requirements that I would say not just us, but also our clients, they have to learn what makes sense and why and how do we want to do this and so forth. And this is something, a process, I think, that has happened over the last maybe 4 or 5 years. it has to come to a certain maturity where, there has to be an understanding, what do we actually want from this training and why, and what can we do here that maybe we couldn't do before, or it was too expensive or too difficult to actually do these sort of trainings, and what do we gain from this? And again, I mean, here it's similar. So you have early adopters and strong believers, and seeing the vision of what's going to happen here, and you have the naysayers that go, no, this is just play, and it's just games, and it doesn't make sense, and so forth. And it's like that. But surprisingly, there is very strong support here, and mostly, and it's interesting, it's kind of like, in the VR entertainment space, I always said, as soon as people put on their headsets, they convert into VR believers. So it's pretty simple. And it's many times here it's the same. So in entertainment, it was like you put a headset on someone, and then they go, wow, this is amazing, I want to do this again, and it's cool. So if you provided a good experience, and it's kind of similar in the training and simulation space. So if we manage to succeed here, and people will quickly go, wow, this is something, we can do a lot of things that we couldn't do before, and this is only the beginning.
So in this case of this relationship with the Swiss police force, right? I believe it's one of the most recent one you have announced. What were some of the, let's say, biggest challenges that you encountered when getting this to move forward and through the finish line? Are there some things that you say, yes, this is the biggest things, this is the biggest thing that we had to really overcome?
It's so before, our business was B2B, so business to business. So we never did B2C. So we didn't publish games to consumers. We sold to businesses. So now the business has changed to B2G, which is business to government. And so B2G is so where business to consumer is very much straightforward. So someone will buy your game or not. B2B, you will have someone that might look at what you offer and evaluate it, and then maybe buy it or not. And it's more complicated than a consumer decision. Now, if you work with police or military or government agencies and so forth, the decision process is 10 times as long and tricky and difficult to navigate, and it's political, and it's budgets that it's just a different, it's a totally different ball game. So it's a much everything just takes longer. And so it's yeah, as I said, it's political. You have to you have to have people that help you and support you and believe in the vision and see it, and then they can bring it forward and push it. And I think that the good thing is that over the last so many years, there's more and more people that really got it. And now if I look at it, it's already there is a lot of support for XR now, also on all kind of sides, because people see the results. And I mean, we went through a whole several years of studies with the German army, bringing in people that would then go through the system in a study that would then answer hundreds of questions, that would then go into a white paper where you would then get pretty clear answers. And so there's things like, everyone that went through the system said, we want such a system for our training. That's 100% of everyone that went through and did these questions. I mean, getting 100% to say we need this, that's pretty impressive. But then you have it on paper, and then you can move stuff, right? So, and it's not just, look, we think there's something good here, but hey, there's a study, and you know what? 100% of all these people that went through this, and it's a lot of people, they said this makes sense. We should have this.
I have a point here. So I think that having something on paper, having proof that this is that the acceptance is high, I think it's great, and I think this is not a luxury that probably every company can have, but certainly having something on paper helps. Now, one thing is the acceptance, and one thing is showing the results, right? So in this case, what were the things that you could show to, for example, potential clients, even governments, that these trainings were effective beyond the saying people want it. Was there something else that you could kind of like extrapolate out of all these tests you did?
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, like this went through studies and it's still ongoing. So we still have studies now every year, and it's the same thing. So, and then it's just a different question. It's not like, do you think it makes sense? But it's basically, how does it enhance your training, and or like these sort of things. And so you just have to ask the right questions, and then you get the answers that hopefully will power the what we believe in.
So now I think that many people here listening might wonder, okay, where are these white paper? I was wondering, is that something that people can have access to? Is that reaching out to you? Are they on the website? Where can people find it?
Yeah, so I mean, that's of course internal. So we published a little bit on it, a few results on. So HOLOGATE is the main website, and then we have a dedicated brand, which is HGXR, which is our simulation group. But you can either go to hologate.com, and then you can click on simulation and training, which will bring you to hgxr.com, or go directly. There is a blog entry which has some of the results. We're working on actually getting results into a better white paper, also including a few other findings and so forth. But it's not finished yet, so I hope to be able to publish this in next few weeks or month or so. So if you want to check in again in a little bit of time, then you might find this some more info. But yeah, it's an internal paper, of course, of the German army, and they are sharing it with basically internally, and also maybe with police or people that are in this circle.
So for whoever is listening, I think whatever Leif can share will probably be in the episode description. So check below, and then that's a place where you can probably find it. Leif, thank you very much. So I am curious right now to wrap this up. You have this profitable, successful two sides of HOLOGATE, one being the entertainment sides and one being this training and simulation for armed forces. How do you see these two moving forward? Do you see one taking over the other? Do you think that the people you have in the team can actually contribute equally to both? I mean, how do you see this moving forward?
Currently, we're heavily invested into the simulation and training space. We love the entertainment, and we still want to continue coming up with new games and ideas for what can be done in LBE or gaming space. And we're closely monitoring what the trends are here, of course. But yeah, there is a huge demand currently on the training and simulation side, and we're currently a little more focused as there's just a lot of pressure to actually deliver systems now. And but yeah, we want to maintain a healthy balance. That would be great.
Awesome. Leif, I think this was a great conversation. I love that. And I'm really looking forward to then some of these, let's say, white paper and outcomes that you can, of course, whatever you can share, because I think it really shows how then people on the field are really leveraging this technology effectively, right? And the impact it has on the user, on the people that goes through this training. So really looking forward to it. Leif, thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Gabriele, for the invite. And yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, please leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really means a lot to me, and it's a great support for the show. Till next time.